The problem with Penny. Penny Polendina is a character whose narrative arc ranks as one of the most dissatisfying and disappointing conclusions to her character, right up there with Adam Torres and James Ironwood. I truly feel bad for both her and her fans, amongst whose numbers I include myself. Penny Polendina, for me, represented the purity and beauty of one's soul, someone who was emblematic of the joys of living and being alive. Simultaneously, she personified the existentialist uncertainty we all face, especially when we come into a world where we have no idea of who or what we are. She struggled with reconciling her origins with her dreams, feeling that she could never have nor be who she truly wanted to be. It was, by default, inherently, unequivocally, and categorically something denied to her. No matter how much she wanted to be real, she just wasn't. Until she realized she was, and had been all along. And then that was taken from her. Penny got to discover who she was, conquer her loneliness, and make lifelong friends that brought her fantastical dreams to actualization. She had an arc, one that actually mattered and was largely handled well. But we should have known the other shoe was just waiting to drop, right onto our faces when it was conveniently above the curb. Penny had one of the most nuanced, meaningful storylines in all of RWBY. The questions posed about identity and agency and what defines a human or person, as well as the validation and vindication finding out she was capable of making friends and discovering she was as she saw herself, a real girl. These were important concepts to explore and examine and affirm within the world of Remnant. All that was thrown out in the final episode of Volume 8, The Final Word, and I have to ask the question, for what? For what reason was Penny killed? For what purpose was her entire arc invalidated in less than 20 minutes? For what end was the relevance of Penny and her storyline in effect redacted and retroactively stricken from the record? More importantly, why? Why was Penny brought back if she's just going to be killed a volume later? Why waste all of Volume 7 and 8 focusing on and building up Penny if you knew you were going to throw that out the window at the end of Volume 8? Why did you waste our time with Volume 7 and 8 if you just sidestepped what you wanted to do in the first place, only to end up going right back there with 2 entire volumes wasted just to accommodate what could have easily been done from the beginning, had you not resurrected Penny in a pathetic, if successful, attempt to employ pathos within your audience and get them to care about your bringing back a deceased character, in effect teasing the same for Pyrrha. Of course, it was never explicitly said, but if Penny could be brought back from the dead, as final as her death appeared, then what's stopping Pyrrha from doing the same, aside from narrative interference in the form of the writers? Yes, I know Penny would have had an easier time to be brought back since she's a robot, and her core was intact, and Pietro could afford to sacrifice more of his aura, and subsequently his health, in order to bring back Penny. But something you need to realize is that literally anything can occur if the writer wishes it to be so. That there's no conceivable reason why they can't bring back Pyrrha if they were willing to do so, ultimately rather pointlessly, for Penny. The entirety of Volume 7 and 8's rigmarole around Penny and her return and her jaunt as the Winter Maiden, and then killing her off after she finally attained humanity, which, by the way, was never necessary to validate her as a person and is actually kind of gross and undercuts her arc in yet another manner if you think about it. Why did we sit through that? Why did we watch her be brought back, if only to watch her die 1 year later and waste our fucking time? I feel like I'm just angry rambling at this point. This was supposed to be much more eloquent, and now here I am sounding like a raving lunatic foaming at the mouth, only part of which is true. I'm going to follow the formula I set with the previous character analysis on John Arc. Psst, go watch that if you haven't already, link is in the description below, in which I scrutinized things in a chronological order. So to get to the end of the mess, let's go back to the beginning, all the way back, Volume 1, Chapter 15, The Stray. But first, Chapter 1, who is Penny Polendina? Penny Polendina is the world's first synthezoid, a robot capable of generating its own aura.
Most girls are born, but I was made. I'm the world's first synthetic person capable of generating an aura.
This is because her father and creator, Pietro Polendina, an Atlesian scientist, sacrificed some of his own life force to imbue it upon his daughter in creation. He alternately did this twice. Penny was wholly unique in that there was only one of her kind in the entire world, herself. She was a feat and marvel of technological innovation, a manufactured being capable of generating and utilizing aura in combat, as was her intended purpose as a purported savior of the world, a role she would eventually fulfill as the protector of Mantle and subsequently Atlas. Of course, we didn't know this at first, When Penny was first introduced, she was somewhat innocuous in that she just appeared to be a normal girl, no different from our title cast of Ruby, Weiss, Blake, and Yang. Sure, she was awkward and weird, and there is something off about her, not quite malevolent enough to be unsettling, but enough to give you pause and make you wonder, what is up with her? What's her deal? These questions would only compound in her subsequent appearance in the next episode, Volume 1, Chapter 16, Black and White. 1 second she's asking Ruby if the others are her friends, and the next she's obliterating the White Fang, taking down bullheads by herself, and elegantly dancing about a battlefield while commanding swords she summons out of the pack on her back like it's a rehearsal for choreography class. So not only is this girl weird, as Roman so aptly puts it,
these kids just keep getting weirder.
She's also insanely powerful. She put a stop to Roman Torchwick's White Fang operation effectively by herself. Blake and Sun may have put up a good fight, but it was only when Penny stepped in that Roman was forced to retreat. Talk about a powerful showing. Combat ready indeed. Penny was, at that point, one of the most powerful characters in the show based on feats. Chapter 2, Penny's Secret. Next we see of her, she slipped away from her friends and is in a limo being chastised as she's driven away by an unseen driver, with a very nice voice might I add, who reminds her that her time will come and she knows better than to run off. We don't see Penny again until one of my favorite episodes of the series, Volume 2, Chapter 4, Painting the Town. But before that, we need the context of Volume 2, Chapter 3, A Minor Hiccup. She saves Ruby's life and asks Shopkeep if he's alright, which I always find a little neat example of her empathy instead of just treating him as a non-factor, with Ruby only being the important one. The fact that she took the time to check it on the man whose vehicle she just totaled has always struck me as a really nice and genuine thing to do. And that was Penny, genuine as can be. What follows is one of the most wholesome, heartbreaking, and heartwarming interactions in the entire show, and one that never fails to get me in my feels. It is the moment that made me a nuts and bolts shipper, and the nuts and bolts equivalent of Blake and Yang's heartful scene in Volume 2, Chapter 6, Burning the Candle, which is just a couple episodes down the road. Here, Penny is clearly apprehensive and incredibly nervous about how to identify what she just did and the abilities she has. She doesn't think Ruby will understand. Consider how happy Penny was to make her first friends in Team Ruby, and how Ruby was the first person to ever call her a friend. Penny felt in that moment she would lose that friendship, that Ruby would think she wasn't worthy of friendship or wasn't even a real person, or that Penny was a liar for keeping so big a secret from her only friend. Or one of her only friends if we're counting the rest of Team Ruby. Penny felt she had to hide who she was at all costs, a feeling I and many other people in the LGBT DBZ community recognize all too well and empathize with. Ruby wouldn't understand who Penny was, she wouldn't want to be her friend anymore, and Penny would lose the only close friend she had ever had. Ruby is doing her best to convey to a blatantly distressed and panicking Penny that she can be trusted and that she wants to help her friend. She just needs to help her understand what is going on so that she can be there for her. And one of the most heartbreaking moments of the show, Penny beseeches Ruby to answer whether or not she's her friend and begs her to promise to be her friend.
I can't. Everything's fine. I don't want to talk about it.
Penny, if you can just tell me what's wrong, I can help you.
No, you wouldn't understand.
Let me try. You can trust me.
You're my friend, right? You promise you're my friend?
I promise.
This scene breaks me every fucking time. It's just so desperate, so raw, that it never fails to get me all up in my feels. I feel so hard for Penny here. So bad and just want to hug her and teach myself how to bake cookies and cake so I can make them for her. Protect Penny Polendina at all costs is what I'm saying. I guess it's a little bit of a moot point now, given what the actual fuck happened in Volume 8's finale, but we'll get to that in due time. Will we get to that? Let's note that a normal robot would never have the mental capacity nor abilities to feel emotions such as apprehension and dread like Penny did. She was a real girl all along, complete with real feelings and real fears. Thankfully, Penny need not have worried. Ruby lives up to her hype as a person with a soul of gold, simple and pure, and it instantly reassures Penny that she's her friend and that she promises. It is then revealed that Penny seemed off for a reason.
Ruby, I'm not a real girl. Oh.
She's not human, or rather, she's a synthetic person. She's a robot capable of generating and utilizing an aura. She believes this means she was not a real girl. Ruby is absolutely on the ball though, and takes her hands before affirming that she is a real girl, that her internal components do not matter any more than Ruby's does, and Penny is suspicious about how well Ruby is taking this perception-shattering piece of information.
I'm not real.
Of course you are. You think just because you've got nuts and bolts instead of squishy guts makes you any less real than me?
I don't... You're taking this extraordinarily well.
Ruby affirms that Penny isn't anything like the soulless automatons that are the Atlesian Knights. She is different in that she has a heart and soul that Ruby can feel. This affirmation of her personhood results in an elated Penny becoming overcome with joy and hugging her best friend and the only person who knows her secret, barring obvious people like her father Pietro and Ironwood, and the soldiers. Thanking her for understanding and affirming she was the best friend anyone could have. A short chat about Penny's creation and her purpose as a protector of the world later. Prosecutor of the world. Penny hides Ruby in the trash and goes with the soldiers, who also know of her true nature. She also requests that Ruby not tell anyone about her secret, lest she be outed. There's a lot to unpack here, but here's my main takeaway. Penny's coming out as a synthetic person is obviously a parallel to a person coming out as queer. The apprehension, the fear, the absolute certainty that they won't understand you, that they will reject you, that you will just have killed that relationship by merit of being who you are. The parallels are apparent. Penny herself comes off as an allegory for being queer, whether that be lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or something else. The most popular reading is that Penny represents trans women, as both groups are real women who are told by society at large that they aren't. Let's make no bones about it, trans women are women and trans men are men, point blank and period. A lot of people see Penny as transcoded. Coding, for those of you not in the know, is the implication or suggesting of something, for example an identity, without outright directly saying it or there not being an analog comparable in whatever medium the story takes place. A proper example is the Faunus. They are a stand-in for minority groups, particularly people of color, although I suppose they can be read as queer-coded. The Faunus aren't flat out said to be people of color or part of the LGBT DBZ community. The White Fang is a direct parallel of the civil rights movement, and subsequently Black Lives Matter, and the Faunus are oppressed for their physical features. There's even the concept of passing, as demonstrated with Ilya Amatola. Passing being the idea of blending in with a group and being able to pass for one of them despite not being one of them, just like how certain light-skinned black people or mixed people can pass for white. The Faunus are coded as POC, and even though there are obviously people of color in the world of Remnant, we don't know if they identify as that or what terminology they use. All issues related to race, such as racism, slavery, fighting for one's rights, and fighting against your oppressors, are seen through the lens of the Faunus and the White Fang, leading them to be coded as POC. POC being short for people of color. This is why a lot of people believe Penny is coded as trans, due to the aforementioned reasons regarding her coming out and desire to be perceived as a girl, which again, she is. She even asked Ruby to promise not to tell anyone, which would lead to her being outed if she did not consent to it. Also, if you haven't figured it out yet, Penny is an allusion to Pinocchio from the fairy tales. If you'll remember, characters in RWBY have to allude to or draw from fairy tales, mythology, legends, and the like. Penny's inspiration is Pinocchio, and I love that her quirk related to lying is that she hiccups in the way that Pinocchio's nose grows when he lies.
I can't. Everything's fine. I don't want to talk about it.
What happened to the other girl?
What girl? I've been by myself all day.
Penny's previous appearances had been so short, she didn't really get much time to develop. The end of Volume 2, Episode 3 and the beginning of Volume 2, Episode 4 developed her massively and answered a lot of questions we had. She was fleshed out, pun intended, quite beautifully, and Penny definitely became one of my favorite characters then. We wouldn't see her again until a brief cameo in Volume 2, Episode 7, Dance Dance Infiltration, whose punny take on Dance Dance Revolution I love, for the record, in case anyone is recording this. I mean, technically I'm recording this as I speak right now, but I digress. Chapter 3, Penny Gets Smelted. I'm so fucking evil for that title. But yes, it's true, Volume 3 isn't too kind to Penny, at least in the latter half. Prior to that, we see she's absolutely wrecking Team Cardinal, while Ciel Soleil and her epic designs just watch on from the background, probably timing it. And more importantly, she has a fun little chat with Ruby. She's come a long way with accepting who she is and even jokes with Ruby about an incident with a magnet she was able to play off. Interestingly, Penny reveals that she has wants and desires, and that she wants and desires to stay at Beacon with her friends. Ruby tells her neither Ironwood nor her father would ever allow it, but Penny says she has a plan to convince them.
Ruby, there's something